Are you living in fear of the Nigerian death call? Next on the Atheist Viewpoint. Welcome to another edition of the Atheist Viewpoint. I'm your co-host, Ron Barrier.
And I'm Dennis Horvitz. And what is the Nigerian death call?
I knew you couldn't wait. No one could wait.
I couldn't. I'm.
That threw you, huh? You didn't know that was coming.
It was completely unexpected.
Well, this was a little...
That isn't the way it went during rehearsal. I don't know what the...
Actually, this was a little thing in the strange but weird but true portion of the New York Post. And I'm going to expand on this a little bit. Nigerians are living in fear of the death call. A text message rumor sent to countless people in the African nation claims that if they answer a text from 09141, that's 09141.
Play that number, folks.
They will die. Nigerian officials have put out a statement alerting scared citizens that the text is a hoax, like most messages from Nigeria.
Well, you know about the Nigerian scam, right? The email scam.
Oh, yeah.
It's called the 419 scam, and I forgot why it's called 419, but basically it's to get people to send money. And
people do.
And people do. People have lost thousands. People have actually gone over to Nigeria and have, I think one case somebody was murdered. So
I mean, I would hope that a free thinker was not caught up in this nonsense, because you should have at least the ability to critically look at this email that's being sent to you, especially when it involves money.
Yeah, if they're asking for money through an email and it's not an official, recognized charity, you're being scammed.
The other one is, of course, that you win these lotteries overseas.
Right, right.
You know, I mean, just think about it. You didn't enter it.
Right.
So why would you respond to the email, and why would you go forward trying to seek these fictitious winnings?
Right, and any, just as a point of information, as a side note, that even in official contests where it's all legit, they will not notify you by email. You will get a certified letter saying that you are the winner. So, even if you've really entered a real contest.
Hey, anybody can send an email.
Yeah, anybody can send an email.
I've seen that the DHL sends out emails saying, if you've been getting spam emails from DHL, they look very official.
Yes.
Also, I think even the Census Bureau.
Right,
or
because they can copy the logo.
Yes,
actually, they can just copy the whole web page, and just the only thing is that where they get you to put in your personal information, of course it goes to this other.
You know, it used to be just for, I guess, really a fleeting moment in human history where actually photographs and videos could have been taken as depicting actual events, recording the truth.
Right.
But with all the technology nowadays, you cannot trust photos, you cannot trust videos.
Nope.
There's nothing that you can trust.
Right.
You know, it really is amazing. Getting back to the Nigerian thing, I used to work in international exporting, and I had a Nigerian colleague who told me a story. Now, Nigeria, come on, this is one of the most backwards, superstitious nations on earth.
And the government is kind of corrupt as well.
The government is corrupt. Their ministers are crazy. We've had several of their ministers. There's a large Nigerian population on Staten Island, and they had some Nigerian ministers up there. They're crazy. These Nigerian ministers are just absolutely insane. Right. So this guy tells me a story about, in the town where he came from, people thought that this guy was turning into an animal at night and stealing vegetation from a neighboring
Oh yeah,
farm.
and that's
Yeah.
I think that's one of the milder rumors.
Well, whatever. And you know, and he says, you know, so the guy stayed up that night, and an animal came in and took some stuff, and he shot it. And when he went there, a man was laying there.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
So I asked the fellow who told me the story, were you a witness to these events? No, he wasn't. But he still bought it at face value.
Sure.
And swore that it happened. In his country, it happens. It's just like, you know, children turn into gourds and other things in Nigeria. That's an unusual place. The name of this episode is Anything Goes, and it really, Dennis and to the audience, it had what caught my eye actually was a letter by an atheist in the local Staten Island paper. Now, this woman's name was Eleanor Katz, and she was responding to a letter by a Mr. Patrick Messanya. And she said, I am confused and more than a little insulted by Patrick Messanya. Mr. Messanya seems to believe that unless you believe in God, you are not concerned with ethics, and therefore anything goes.
Ah.
Now, I went back and did a little research and found a number of his published letters, okay?
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I had decided not to read any of them. Not because I was practicing editorial control or editorial license, which of course we can do on this program.
Right.
But that none of them really made sense. And the one thing that was a riding theme with all his letters, and I'm sure if he happened to stumble upon this show on Staten Island, he would agree with me, is that it's not so much that if you believe in God, but more so that you embrace his beliefs in his God and what his God wants.
Right.
You know, so it's a different thing, and I thought about this because we always get the question all the time, Dennis, about atheism and morality. Where do you get your morals from? As if somehow we're supposed to like get them from some sort of morality cafeteria, and you go up there and you pick your morals.
Well, the people who ask that question, they ask that question because it's a priori assumption for them that the only place you can get your morals is from God, and since we don't believe in God, they can't fathom where we get our morals from.
Like the same place they did in the first 7 years of their life, from their family, from their family's associates,
right?
From the people you keep, because who reads the Bible before you're even 10 or 12 years old?
Right. And as I'm sure if I can guess where this is going, and with I have some information here to back it up. Apparently, the brain is wired for morality, for altruism. I know that it's been said that morality flows from human experience, but more important than that, apparently it has a biological basis to it.
I would agree.
I know that several years in a row, Dr. Andy Thompson, who just wrote a book about why we believe in gods, he has, and in fact, he gave a presentation, has done so a couple of times to New York City atheists, where he just shows how the brain, the parts of the brain, and how they're wired for altruism and wired for belief. So I assume that's where you're going with this.
Well, you know, in a way, you know, it's very interesting you said that because I had received a notice from the Center for Inquiry, and one of their guest speakers over the past couple of weeks was and again I forget his name, and I'm very sorry, but the topic was the morality of the animal world. And it's funny you bring that up too, because it was just last week my wife and I were watching on one of the nature shows where several years ago a young boy fell into a gorilla pit.
Yes.
And a gorilla came over and protected that child from any aggressive gorillas.
Right.
Until human help came along and they assisted the child out without incident.
Yes.
All right. There was also a story of
Very
an
famous.
elephant who did the same thing for a young girl.
And I remember reading a couple of years ago, and this is really wild. Apparently, this is in Africa, some game preserve in Africa, and this toddler wandered off. Of course, they were frantic, and they found the kid a couple of hours later, sitting on the ground, crying, and on either side of him were 2 adult lions. And apparently they just, whatever the kid, maybe, I don't know, with the frequency of the kid's voice or whatever it was, but it stimulated that protective response rather than...
They interpreted the child's sound as stress.
As stress and as a...
But not fear.
Right, right.
Not fear stress, but
right.
helpless stress.
Right, and as a youngster kind of thing.
Because I'm sure when one of these water buffaloes are getting attacked, they're stressed.
Yeah. No, they probably hit that button, whatever it was, and of course it could have been that they maybe had already fed too. That may have had a lot to do with it. Yeah. But that's funny. There's a lot of those stories around.
Well, yeah, you know what, Dennis, and also our viewing audience. The thing that struck me was the conclusion that somehow, if you don't believe in God, anything goes.
Right.
And I thought about that for a while, Dennis, and I said, well, you know, in the free thought community, mentally, anything does go. There are no questions that should not be addressed.
Yes.
There are no stones that should not be unturned. There is no knowledge that should be deemed forbidden or that we should not know.
Well,
so in an intellectual sense, free thinking is anything goes. And I also, you know, thinking about that also, and I'd like a couple of your thoughts on this. Is it possible, now, with all due respect to Frank Zindler of American Atheists, there is always a debate amongst the free thought community of whether or not we have free will.
Uh-huh.
Okay. For the sake of argument, okay, let us accept free will, that you have the capacity to make conscious decisions on your own.
It all depends on how you interpret it too.
Okay.
It's very sticky.
But I would think by, let's say the religious view of free will, that
Right.
God imbues you with free will.
Right.
Then in fact, do not atheists and free thinkers and humanists use that free will more often than the religious? Do they constrain themselves by their belief system?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, here's the thing. I don't see how you can have, in a world, in a universe created by an omniscient God, an omnipotent God, how can you have free will when basically this God is running everything, everything goes according to plan, and this God already knows what you're going to do and the choices you make.
And if you make the wrong choice, you're going to pay for it.
Yeah, but I mean,
yeah, the whole thing makes no sense.
how can you possibly have free will in that under those circumstances? Because, well, I mean that goes into a much wider discussion. But
all right, let's look at anything goes. I would opine that it is in fact monotheism, supernaturalism, that has an anything goes attitude in it, because once you find a line of scripture that gives you justification to act on a crazy thought, it is anything goes.
yeah,
9/11 was anything goes.
yeah. Well, the thing is that when you're dealing with make-believe, in this case, it's very serious make-believe.
Very serious. I mean, we read the definition of real a few weeks ago, and people will say on television, God is real.
Right.
That, to me, that's an abuse of the word real.
Right. Well.
It may be subjectively real to them, but
Right.
but it doesn't go any further.
But when you get to make up stuff, when you're I mean, especially when you have a God that is supposed to be inscrutable, the mysterious, God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, the mysterious way.
Then
yeah.
basically anything you make up is correct.
It's a mysterious way.
justifies anything. So if you're killing someone to save their soul,
which the church did during the Inquisition,
right,
it was
and
better to destroy the body and save the soul. That
right,
was their justification.
you know, basically in that sense, because anything goes has been justified in the name of God. You could, you know, you could have extreme conservatism, what am I saying? Monastic kind of life, and yet you can have unrestrained warfare and murder, and even rape.
As long as it's justified by something.
As long as there's under the aegis of that you're ultimately doing the will of God.
We see that nowadays under less savage, well, that remains to be seen, the pro-life movement who targets
right.
Doctors, and they put
right.
their name and phone number up on everything, you know. And
right.
I saw, was it on MSNBC, Rachel Maddow?
Oh, yes.
It was a gentleman, and the name of the organization was Voice for Choice. All right, and he's actually a landlord,
right?
Who a doctor rents, and he's the landlord, and this doctor is in fact involved in female reproductive health, right, and all of its aspects. And the landlord was part of the school board, and he was going to speak at a school meeting with the students there. And these pro-life people came with the usual fetus photos,
yes, right,
the guy's name and phone number up there to call. And they had people calling his office, you know, telling him either with threats or telling him to not rent anymore to the doctor. And he said he was very annoyed by all this. They were harassing him, they were bullying him.
And sometimes they bully their children, too.
Well, yes, that's why they went to the school, too. They make sure they go after the children. And what he did was, through his caller ID, started taking down the numbers of all these people.
Right.
And now he started an organization, Voice for Choice, and any clinic that's harassed, they should gather the phone numbers. And what they do is they call these people back.
Right.
And tell them, thank you for the phone call. However, we're not going to stop doing this. This is a legal right in the United States. And we ask that you you stop from harassing us. Well, now that the worm has turned, these pro-life people are accusing them of harassing phone calls.
Of phone harassing one, right?
Yes. So it's very interesting. Anything goes for them.
Yes.
But when it comes back, all of a sudden, we can't have this.
Well, first of all, I mean, some of these people have received death threats, and it's against federal law to threaten someone over the phone. And I think whenever and wherever they can identify someone who's making a death threat, they should inform the FBI.
Absolutely. Anyway, we're going back to this woman again. This is Miss Eleanor Katz. She goes, sorry to disappoint you, sir, but I am an atheist and have been one for many years. I do not think that an invisible spirit in the sky rules my life. I am moral and a law-abiding citizen. Now, of course, she goes, characterizing atheists and agnostics as lawless is insulting and narrow-minded.
And childish.
Yeah, it really is.
It's pure.
It is childish. It doesn't come out of any reality.
Any real knowledge.
Exactly, any real knowledge. And I also find that the people who say those things have never read anything by an atheist either. They don't know. They're quick to give you their religious books, but to use their term, God forbid, they should ever read a secular.
Never mind. A lot of these people haven't even read religious books. It's just an emotional vomiting. That's what it really is.
Makes themselves feel better, feel superior.
Or they
is it because the Bible tells them?
Here's what it is. I think, and we've touched upon this before, and we probably will again. There's, unlike people of different religions, there's something about atheists that really pushes people's buttons in ways that a person of another religion will not do. And I think that's because a Christian and a Hindu may disagree, about the details, but but they reinforce each other's core belief in that they both believe that there is a God.
Would the buzzword that crosses all these denominational lines, that kind of attenuates any sharp differences in opinions between the very different groups that you mentioned, spirituality?
Yeah, I think that's it. But I think
they can all use that word.
They all can. Yeah, I mean, even certainly the more liberal wing of any religion, or the mainstream, wing of any religion, generally, especially in the United States, where we're at least somewhat of a secular nation.
Secular in actions.
Yeah, where people were. And mostly because in this kind of environment, most of what you do in your day has nothing to do with your own or anyone else's religion, even if you have a religion.
Right.
But so you're kind of free to, it's not an issue. It's not,
No.
But I think unless most mainstream people, I think, of any religion will certainly acknowledge the spirituality, or there can be spirituality in other religions.
Right.
But
and that's like their chat room. That's their
yeah. I mean,
that's the little corridor they set up for themselves that they can go into and interact with one another. By the way, this guy Messania, one of his letters was that he decried the interfaith any interfaith services.
Oh, sure.
But that's consistent with his beliefs, and you know what? I can respect that.
I'll tell you something. And maybe we're getting off subject. I don't know, but in reading The God Delusion, Richard Dawkins, and I think Christopher Hitchens alluded to it as well. They said similar things in that they respect the fundamentalists because at least they stand for what they believe, whereas it's the liberals who they think are kind of hypocritical, because you either believe that your religion is right and other religions are wrong, or why be in that religion? You know what I mean? Why, yeah, it's wonderful and it's a good thing.
Well, that's right.
I'm not knocking it.
If you don't care whether you're right or wrong.
I'm not knocking, because if other people's religions are just as valid as yours, then what's the big deal? Why even separate? How can you even justify having your own specific religion if you might as well, well, there's the one justification, I suppose, is if you're brought up in that tradition, that's the way it's emotionally meaningful for you.
Well, and you also grow up with a certain community.
Within a community. But on a philosophical level, what's the difference? What does it matter whether you're a Baptist or a Methodist or a Lutheran or a Catholic?
It really amounts to nothing more than mental masturbation, as somebody I know used to call it.
But in some ways, you're right. I mean, in some ways he's right. That
he wouldn't pray with a Hindu.
Right.
He just won't. He won't pray with a Buddhist.
I mean,
they're
don't
wrong.
Get me wrong.
He's right. They're wrong.
Don't get me wrong. I think that interfaith, while I may fundamentally disagree with the existence of God, I think interfaith events that have to a good purpose, a good social purpose, that unite people, I think those are good things.
It's usually over something secular.
Yeah.
It is usually over something
which
secular.
Actually the 9/11 situation, the 9/11 event was, it happened to have been done by religious fanatics, but
yes,
we discussed that a couple of shows ago.
That's right, and I'm glad that the clergy were not really allowed to participate.
Right.
Well, we're down to the last couple of minutes. Mr. Messania also noted that the Ten Commandments have been removed from several public places. This is very interesting. A few years ago, back when there was a real fervor for the Ten Commandments on public places.
Which I don't think it's completely abated.
It hasn't. What is wrong with these people who want the Ten Commandments publicly posted to just put them on their own lawn?
Yeah.
I mean, if there are 20 Christian families on one block and they all put up their 10 Commandments, or even one puts up their 10 Commandments, who's going to complain?
Yeah.
Nobody's complaining. It's not that the Ten Commandments are being removed from public place. Well, yes, they are being removed from government. Usually they are government places, courthouses,
Yeah, they're not.
public parks. They have nothing to do with the public well-being.
Right. Religious symbols have no business being on publicly funded property or events. There is a place for that. No one is saying, while they want to remove, American Atheist wants to remove the cross from the 9/11 memorial at Ground Zero.
Right.
No one is saying that they shouldn't have their cross, or says that denies that that's meaningful to Christians.
It was at the church right across the street for 10 years without incident.
Without incident, and let them have it and put it back there.
Collect there, put their little money ball there.
Have fun. I think we're getting the high side.
We're getting down to the last minute. Okay, well, thank you for watching the Atheist Viewpoint. Remember to visit the American Atheist website at www.atheist.org. There you will find a lot of information about not only American Atheists, but our activities, our subgroups around the country. You have AA News. What else you have there? Everything.
Lots of stuff. Oh,
is there a link to New York City Atheists?
There might be.
Okay.
And make sure to watch out for the Nigerian death call.
Yes. Well, and that number again was. That number again was.
Winston 59374
09141. 09141.
So if you get that call,
09.
booga booga booga.
On that note, 09141.
Ron Barrier, Dennis Horvitz, thank you for watching.
Have a good night.